we stay in topic. It's about what smart cities may learn from museum education, curated augmented reality storytelling. And it's presented by Florian Wienczek. He's an expert on interface of digital media and cultural learning. And he works at Fluxguide in the areas of digital concept, project management. And he is together with his colleague presenting this paper, who is also an expert at Fluxguide working on digital concepts and project management as well. And welcome. And I'm very happy to have you here. And please start with your presentation.
Yes, so I will share my screen and we'll do it live and not in a video. So let's see.
Works wonderful.
So now it should be full screen, right? Okay, yeah, thanks a lot for inviting us to the conference and let us show our work. So we will now combine different projects. So on the one hand, the project Holomuse, which was done in the last, let's say, 2 years. And that was really on the topic of augmented reality inside museum spaces and focusing on cultural learning inside museum spaces. And now we have a new set of projects more going towards smart cities. And that is what Anna will show you in the end. These are still work in progress. They're still in the very beginning. And but we will show how the concepts and what we learned from the cultural learning projects can transfer there. And we are working in cultural heritage and in cultural learning quite a bit. So we, as a company, we're also producing mobile applications for museums and cultural institutions. We do a lot of consulting on how to use digital media in learning and knowledge transfer formats. And yeah, we're also doing obviously a lot of research and development in these directions. And so let me start with showing you what we've worked on so far. And so going a little bit back into theory. So nowadays, basically a concept that was already introduced in 2009, Web Squared, says, okay, now we have mobile devices with tons of sensors like cameras, microphone, GPS, gyro sensors, where computers can basically learn about the world through those sensors. The location is getting more and more important. So especially if you think about the concept of net locality, and we think about search, but also experience, information is tied to locations. And also like the world feeds into the web and into networks. And also objects tend to have more and more information shadows that get machine readable, that can be processed. And so, yeah, this kind of information, digital information on the one hand, and the world, the physical world on the other hand, is more and more tied together. And that's what we already learned in the very first talk. And so if you think about experiences, if you think about transferring knowledge, if you think about cultural learning, there the term of holistic experience becomes, for us at least in our work, really important. So on the one hand, we have physical displays, we have physical spaces like cityscapes, like museum galleries, like public space. And on the other hand, we have digital displays in different kinds, be it a computer where at home I can look at an online collection, or at some kind of walkthrough through a gallery, at mirror worlds like Google Street View, or virtual worlds like Second Life, or the like. We have VR headsets, which take me also completely immersively into a virtual world. We have installation pieces which combine physical spaces and augmenting it with projections, with digital information. And then of course, we have augmented reality, mixed reality, which really combines those two and is really at the interface of the physical and the digital. And so it's really important to think those two dimensions together. And in the beginning, they were thought of, okay, we have the physical display and we have the virtual museum, but we can't have this dichotomy anymore. We have to think them together. And I think that is where AR really comes into play as a medium, because it is able to combine these two these two layers. And so for AR, we have two very dominant reception devices. On the one hand, mobile AR, that is still the most dominant because a lot of people go around with their smartphones and mobile phones, and especially the newer ones are really working well with AR already, especially since Apple and Google introduced their respective AR kits and AR core. But we also have glassware, and that is also important to mention because we worked in the project HoloMuse on both layers, so on mobile and on glassware, and had a look also where those different reception modes come into play. And so now, how can augmented reality be effectively used for cultural learning? And so a lot of these examples, I will only briefly mention what dimensions there are and then go to our projects because we heard a lot about it already. So we can use AR, for example, to make the invisible data or information or cultural objects visible. And so here you see an example that was used in the Belvedere in the Chile exhibition, that we suddenly have X-ray images which are overlaid on top of the original paintings. And so making basically the layers behind the paint visible directly at the original. We can bring static objects to life. For example, use a static object as an avatar that can suddenly speak to you. We can show objects in action, especially if you think about technical museums where you have machines, where you're talking about complex processes. You can really show how things work directly at an object or at a place. You can experience possible pasts or possible futures if you think about mediation of architectural history, of mediation in public spaces, where suddenly you can tell stories about how things were possibly at a past, have digital reconstructions, or think about how something like climate change would affect that place in the future. So this is another concept that can be used. Let's see. If you think about AR and spaces, so of course, outer spaces as well as indoor spaces can become virtual exhibition spaces. I can place data, I can place cultural objects anywhere, basically. So any place can become a place for learning, can become a place for exhibiting information. And so, for example, one project took a temporary closed art collection to a festival, or another project, in that case, it's in MoMA, they used the digital exhibition space to then implant sort of a guerrilla exhibition in the MoMA gallery without their consent. But you could also do it, of course, with the consent of the museum and then use the digital museum space differently. Or you could actually use AR as an exhibition planning tool. So that's the idea of curating room, where you could use online collections or digital collections to actually either plan your physical exhibition without actually having to touch the real objects and bring them in directly in the space, or you can actually also collaborate in curating kind of virtual exhibitions as a way to engage users and mediation. Of course, interaction is very important. Suddenly you can actually interact, at least virtually, with objects you usually cannot touch in a museum, which can go as far as that you're really physically engaged in a project, like, for example, mimicking a statue and then finding objects which are similar to that, so using search tools as well, or using audio AR, where you place audio in a 3D space and then use that for mediation. And we had a project, Eyes of Things, where we had this kind of hands-free audio guide where we used image recognition technology to actually detect what work we're interacting with and then give you some more audio information. Or there's also 3D audio where you can really sense where people are in a space and then really work with audio experiences there. And then, of course, in a lot of projects, if we think about multimedia guides or audio guides, we focus very much on activating knowledge, on methodologically guided interpretation, really giving information. And so the whole experience part and the whole perception part, where the user really, first of all, himself or herself experiences something, that is getting more and more in the background with mediated cultural learning. And so one hope also with augmented reality is to get that really more on the forefront again. So to really start like the association method in art pedagogy, for example, does, on perceiving the space around you, on perceiving an artwork, and really, first of all, thinking for yourself, looking, actively exploring, and then only get to the next steps where information is given. And so also with Holomuse, we started to work on storytelling and curated storytelling directly at an object, but also we were then thinking, okay, where can it go further? How can we actually lead the gaze of a visitor towards specific details of a work? Or yeah, how we can use storytelling methods, giving different forms of multimedia, for example, zooming into details, highlighting details, having textual information, having auditive or visual information to really enhance the work or enhance the space. And then, yeah, give through storytelling also sort of a lead of the gaze. That can be combined with avatar-based storytelling as well. So that, for example, in that case, a ranger in a national park would directly be able to talk to a group of visitors like he would do in person, and then highlight also certain things at the location. And then, yeah, really having a real figure, also, for example, a figure out of a painting, telling you the story, being the expert, and guiding you through an object or through storytelling. And with one of the examples where we used this kind of curated storytelling, that was the Bruegel painting children's games at the Art Historic Museum in Vienna. And so the video shows how we went about. So we highlighted certain objects, we had storytelling behind it, we had storytelling going over, leading you over the image, highlighting certain experiences. So you see also in the corner below how such a highlight would look like through the lens. And there we used really the HoloLens, so that you would have the hands-free and you would directly have information and points that lead your gaze embedded in your view. And so for the visitors, so we had also an evaluation there. And so for them, it was really a new kind of experience in its own right with AR. And that increased really the personal interest in the artwork as well. And also this kind of narrative supported the recall of visual details. But it was also clear that it was quite a young medium still. And for some people, especially with the HoloLens, difficult to handle at first. So this would really call for more support in the museum through staff that guides people through this kind of experience and how to deal with the technology. Another case study we worked at in the project was kind of a simulation app for an exhibition at the Deutsche Museum in Munich. And so that was for an exhibition on coffee. And here we have a kind of simulation game. It's a gamified situation where the user can grow a coffee plant, and that was inside the museum, inside an installation that was a coffee plantage. And you could grow your own coffee plant, also have influence on the climate, and then get sort of a feedback how the climate actually affects the results of how much coffee you get in the end. And so you can also take that game anywhere, basically, through a public app. And so also taking it to school classes, taking it to your living room, or here in a park in Vienna. And so this leads towards a concept of kind of a digital laboratory, which we find quite interesting, so that you can actually work with all kind of data, scientific data or cultural data, digital humanities data, and explore the data together, have gamified experiences around it, and really use that as a mediation tool. And so that leads me to summing up basically the value of cultural objects, or in general digital data in AR, before we go on how we can actually use that for smart cities. So basically, the places are quite important. So physical spaces can be enriched and objects can be enriched and become information hubs. Every place can basically become a place for learning and experimenting. So you can transfer objects or data in different educational settings or in public space. And also AR can be basically a lens for for, on the one hand, framing your experience, but also a communication stimulus to talk about it, to use it for decision making. And also manipulation value is really important. The manipulation value of the data. So it's not just showing something or having it in use, but really being able to interact with the data. And with that, I lead over to Anna and how to transfer the concepts to smart cities.
Thank you, Florian. So actually, you can go to the next slide already, and then we can jump right in. So I'm gonna tell you a little bit about one of our current research projects. In the first talk we heard today, Gerhard took us on a little trip to the past. I'm gonna take you now to the future. As climate changes and cities become hotter, we need to boost green infrastructure, especially in urban environments, to achieve positive effects on our microclimate, which impacts all of us. So with our research project GLARA, which stands for Green Living, Augmented and Virtual Reality, we are with 3 partners who are experts in different fields like urban planning or climate data analysis, trying to create a mobile application that uses AR and VR to convey complex, abstract and complicated microclimate data in an intuitive and understandable way. So we utilize AR and VR as a lens and as a frame of reference for scientific concepts like thermal load score. What is that? And present that in an intuitive and engaging way that makes you want to dive into these important subject matters. The second part is that we also want to use this app as a new tool for civic participation in urban development. And we know that change comes from the people and politics is sometimes very slow to react. So we want to make this new tool available for participation in urban planning. Florian, next slide, please. So GLARA takes comprehensive analysis and complex data, which normally looks like things like the one to the left on your screen, which is meant for experts in the field and uses not only terms that might not be known, but also 2D simple graphics that can only be interpreted by experts mostly and is not suitable for the broader public. So our team mates at Green for Cities, they use innovative planning tools like GreenPass for analysis for data experts, which is currently used in biddings for architectural development projects, for example. So what do? We take, next slide please, these data and turn it into something more like this. I want to emphasize that this is a preliminary sketch because we are only in the very early stages of our project. We started last November and the project will run through October 2022. So we are now in the stage where we We conduct stakeholder interviews and are preparing for our first mock-ups and further development. So the visualization is not final, just to take this abstract concept of this climate data app and make it into something a little more tangible. I want to invite you to a little thought experiment. Let's imagine you live somewhere in an inner city street of Old Town Vienna, and your street is set to be revitalized. Or maybe you're planning to move to a new area, maybe on the outskirts of the city, where there's a completely new development going on. Either way, you care about effects on your living quality and you want to have an impact. So we want to take Clara and make it a tool for all people who are residents, who are interested in urban development, who are just interested in the effects of green assets on microclimate. And we want to give you a tool that can give you this information anywhere, anytime, and make complex themes easy and intuitive. Because there are some drawbacks with classic participation tools. If you think of conventional participation, most of the time you have to be at a certain place at a certain time, maybe not right now with Corona, but if we think back to our lives like a few weeks ago. So maybe you have little kids, you can't go out in the evening and you can't be part of it. So it only represents a fraction of the population. Also, the materials used are often difficult to understand. So this is where Clara comes in. You open the app, you see some predefined scenarios, and you see what effects they would have on your microclimate and how it would affect you. So as Florian mentioned before, in the museum context, we take physical objects. In this context, it's not an artwork, but maybe it's your building, your street, and they become information hubs. So the street can become a place for learning and for experiencing information and data. You can control the settings. So think of it like a little video game. You, if you're in an area that already exists, if it's a revitalization project, you, through your phone screen and through the camera, you see how it looks right now. And we have 2D and 3D overlays, like green assets, visual elements, shadows, composite parameters like the felt temperature. And you can walk around will look different in the spring and in the summer than it does in the winter. And can you still hear me? Because it says my connection is unstable.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great.
But please, slowly but surely come to an end.
Yeah, I will hurry up.
Thank you.
So you can control certain settings. So we utilize all kinds of functions in your phone to create an immersive AR and MR experience. The app will have a modular design. So you have an AR module for revitalization areas that works with surface detection and GPS integration. You have a VR model where you can like walk in ergo perspective, like in a video game, you can walk through your area. And AR and VR provide a lens into this different reality, a glimpse into the future or a possible future, and a frame of reference that hopefully stimulates communication in groups and makes green assets a starting point for dialogues between users, the residents, and city officials. So to summarize, our main objectives in this current research project are, we are doing 2 case studies where we are assessing target group specific requirements, and the gathered insights will inform the development of target group specific business models for the planned market rollout. And of course, we will be developing the modular app and the participation methods. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your interest.
Thank you so much. Sorry that I had to interrupt you a little bit. It's very interesting. I think you could go on and would not lose the audience because, and it's really, I like also how the story arc of this whole panel went very, very nicely. So thank you for this glimpse into the future. There's already a question from Sylvia. Sylvia, do you want to have it yourself or shall I take it?
She's not on the podium anymore.
Oh, she's not on the podium, so I will read it to you. The holistic experience. Did you think about other senses like smelling and feeling as well? Or how holistic is an experience actually? I also came across this expression, holistic. I mean, it's like very holy.
That's true. I mean, holistic experience, of course, because you have the physical world as part of it. So sort of holistic for me is bridging the physical world with the digital and thinking of it as one experience. And of course, smell and touch, haptic experiences, everything is part of our experience of the physical world. And of course, that plays into it. Question is how much you can control it in certain situations, especially if you think about your home environment. There, of course, what you can control as a designer of that kind of experience is limited. But of course, all the senses are part of a holistic experience. Yeah.
Mm.
And in Clara, we are thinking about, well, we can't really incorporate them physically, but we are trying to trigger some your responses from your body or from your memories. Like we are thinking about and conceptualizing how to integrate, for example, heat spots in the AR experience with overlays or maybe with some 3D sound elements. And because you've already for sure experienced a hot summer in the city, or you like can't even deal almost. So we are thinking about how to maybe evoke some feelings and bridge that gap in even another dimension. So, yeah.
Okay, there is a question from Gerhard. Are you still on the podium, Gerhard?
Yes, of course I am.
Okay.
I'd like to know, this Clara app is very interesting, especially for me in Graz, because we have all these discussions with the microclimate and so on very often, and urban planning. Where do you think the data will come from? Will it be created locally, for example, with a thermometer on the mobile phone, or do you want to get them from a global database? Are you planning to introduce emulation for this temperature and all the environmental data? This would be interesting for me.
Mm-hmm. Our partner Green for Cities, they have already a product on the market called Green Pass, which is being used already in architectural competitions and all kinds of other certifications. And they use, they have all kinds of data setups to gather the data, and then they run simulations. And they, for example, do a summer day, and then one day in autumn, and so on. So they collect the data, and they have very complicated AI algorithms, and I can't even explain it to you. They have tried to explain it to us. It's fascinating, really, and I've learned many more new terms. But yeah, so for the case studies, we are working closely with one case study is a completely new development project so there's like nothing there now. So we are working with the developers and have all their data and their plans and the climate data we are measuring, and GreenPass is providing certification as part of the study. And for the revitalization project, the same. We are working closely with the city officials here and gathering our own data. So it only works, we are talking about like one block of a street. We are not talking about a whole city here. So especially for the case studies now. So the data would have to be collected. Or maybe if then there is some open source data by then, that's great.
There's also a question from Mario from the Q&A section. Does the app itself facilitate a dialogue, or does it mainly raise awareness?
It facilitates a dialogue. It's supposed, we want to make it a new tool for participation. We thought about it a lot, like there were some development stages. At the beginning, we were thinking of letting people design their own scenarios, like in The Sims, but we quickly had to throw that overboard because our developers were like, how, that's not possible. And we also didn't want to overcomplicate it for the users. So we will have predefined scenarios, and there will be some kind of voting and feedback mechanisms in the app, because it's a focus that we want to be a solution for people who maybe can't participate in standard like participation tools where you meet up in the evening because you have little kids, you can't go out. So we want to build a new participation tool.